The first complex reflex of the GI tract is deglutition, or swallowing. And for as little as we think about this maneuver, it's actually very, very complex. And in medicine, if you're going to encounter patients who have swallowing difficulties for a wide variety of reasons, because this process, it involves the GI tract, the respiratory tract, the skeletal system, the skeletal muscle system, and the central nervous system. So you got a lot of things going on here, a lot of things that can go wrong. All right. Ultimately, what we need to do is we need to take our bolus and pass it into the esophagus and into the stomach. Now, the complexity comes in the fact that the respiratory and GI tracts share the top half of the system, right? So from vocal cords on up, GI tract is sharing these structures with the respiratory tract, so there has to be some coordination. So we take this complex swallowing system and divide it into 3 stages. The voluntary stage you are aware of, okay? So, you chew, 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 and at some point it's, all right, time to swallow, and that is a conscious decision, right? So in the voluntary stage, the bolus of food that's been all mixed up is pushed to the back and up against the soft palate. That is detected, and then the bolus is then shuttled from that spot involuntarily down the rest of the system. So voluntary stage ends with pushing the bolus up and back. The pharyngeal stage takes over. It's involuntary, and it's the most complex. I have a whole other slide on it. And then we get to the esophageal stage, which is quite simple because it's really just peristalsis. It's involuntary, but it's also the longest. In other words, the longest in time and the longest in distance. Okay, so this takes the longest, but this is the most complex. So we, in this picture are the major players in swallowing, right? So we have our swallowing center in the brainstem. We have our innervation to the soft palate that's going to detect that bolus of food, okay? The epiglottis, and you haven't done the head yet, have you, right? Okay. So the epiglottis is a floppy cartilage structure that sits at the base of the tongue. When we swallow food like this, as the food comes down, it pushes on the tip of the epiglottis, and the epiglottis folds over and effectively covers the trachea. This is the trachea in the front. This is the vocal cords. This is the esophagus in the back. So remember, the esophagus is always posterior to the trachea, all right? Kind of an important relationship when you're intubating somebody, right? Because the tube goes here, not here. Okay, but that's a question for another day. All right, so epiglottis folds over, the bolus slides past, it pops back up, and then the respirations can start to begin again, right? Now, vocal cords are in here too, because the body knows that putting food into the lungs, into the trachea, bad idea. So when we swallow, our vocal cords close, right? Another blockade to materials going the wrong way. And then once we get into the esophagus, the swallowing center is going to coordinate peristalsis to move that material all the way down. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so this is what's called it's a swallowing study, technically. What we're looking at here is we're looking at x-rays in real time, right? So they're shooting about 15 x-rays a second, and then the computer lines those up into a video, just like animation, okay? So here, let's take a look at that. All right, so it hasn't moved yet. All right, so here, person is swallowing, right? Chew, 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 chew. Watch right here. That bolus is going to go back and up. There it is, and then down, right? Did you see how quickly that went by? So now watch in this area. We see that the larynx comes up towards the jaw, right? The esophagus folds down, and the transit across this area that is shared between the respiratory and GI tract is very rapid, right? There's the esophagus, or the epiglottis, you can just barely see it. So chew, 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 and then the swallow is very fast through here. Now, once we get down into the esophagus, it slows way down, right? So the swallowing down through the peristalsis is much slower in on the way to the stomach than it is across that weak spot where the trachea and esophagus sit right next to each other. Now we're going to be, now we're sort of mid-esophagus, right? Oh, we're going to go back up. Where are we going here? Oh, now it's liquids. Now we're going to do liquids, right? Okay, so you don't have the chewing effect, but the same systems are still in play. So oftentimes when patients have swallowing problems, they'll have swallowing problems with both liquids and solids, just liquids or just solids, right? So the liquids and solids require different muscular activity in these areas. So you can end up with problems with both or problems with one or the other.